today, federal prosecutors, in a case that began under the prior administration and proceeds under the current administration, are making a very serious case against Sean Diddy Combs, the music mogul, rapper, and entrepreneur. And the government delivered blistering opening statements today at the start of the trial, painting the defendant, Sean Diddy Combs, as an abusive, methodical predator. He faces these charges of sex trafficking, racketeering, and they have evidence dating back really 10 to 20 years. The first day of the trial brings tremendous interest. Diddy has been a prominent, powerful leader in culture and business for decades. There were crowds as his lawyers and others came into the courtroom today. The case, of course, presents many issues of national importance. Domestic violence against women, which is a rampant problem often underaddressed in our society in terms of how we all deal with it with each other, and certainly in our court system. There's also predatory abuse in positions of power, and specifically in entertainment and music industry, something that has been discussed and reported, and we've seen some other big cases deal with this. But we're talking about ugly parts of aspects of rap culture and the hip-hop industry. There's also homophobia, repression, and abuse, which is a complex problem that can also intertwine with some of the testimony we will hear in this case and the pressures surfaced in this trial. So I'll tell you up front, this is far more than just a tabloid or celebrity case or people who look at it only in that narrow window. It is especially far more for the victims who view this as a chance for change, however long overdue. And I'll tell you something, if you're looking at this and going, okay, Ari, but like, is this just about the rap thing? Is this a celebrity thing? And there's a lot of other things going on in the country right now that are national news. Why does this matter? Well, I'll tell you something we've learned here at the intersection of law and news and sometimes politics. When there are these big trials, the big national cases, we hear from advocates that they're not just seeking justice in the courtroom. A lot of advocates are seeking a conviction of Diddy for alleged crimes long overdue. But they're also advocating for rights and reform across our country and court system to try to prevent these types of alleged crimes from recurring again, from happening to more people, to the next generation. So what I'm telling you is, based on the evidence and what we've observed here, this does matter as law, as politics, and for civil rights and victims' movements. And in that sense, it follows a pretty American tradition of how some trials become our cultural and ethical flashpoints.
It's quite a scene out here already. You have media from around the world, throngs of onlookers. Today, that highly anticipated trial against the former Hollywood heavyweight begins.
Not guilty on aggravated manslaughter of a child. I tell you, people's mouths are hanging open here. A very big crowd of people collected as word of the verdict got out.
Charles Manson said he was happy today, that he is always happy, even though he is charged with 7 murders.
As he was escorted out of the courthouse, Cosby raised his cane in response to supporters, while others jeered.
It just doesn't fit. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
Hundreds of millions of people were riveted by the O.J. trial in this country and around the world. And it's deeper than just, say, modern culture, cameras in the courtrooms. As we begin this Diddy trial, which could matter for all the reasons I mentioned, I want to take us all the way back briefly to the 1800s. There was a philosopher who chronicled America's civic culture. You might remember him from school, Alexis de Tocqueville. And he reflected then on how American equality and democracy seemed to be fortified by how we use juries, what was then a kind of a novel idea, that we draw our jurors from our communities so we judge our own peers. Someone's life can literally hang in the balance of what 12 people decide as your peers. He wrote that the institution of the jury invests the people, that class of citizens, with the direction of society. What I'm telling you is I think it lives on now, the way we as Americans view some trials. These are stories, but they're reality. And they're stories about ethics and about possible justice. They're a way that we understand each other. Now, if you go then to, say, the tense months after Donald Trump's first surprise election there in late 2016, you may recall that there was a trial-related feminist backlash that sought accountability at this local level. So you had an election, you had a response to that, but it catalyzed the wider Me Too movement. That was just months after Trump's election. There was a lot going on. The New York Times then broke that story about Harvey Weinstein's predation. It was followed by journalist Ronan Farrow's New Yorker reporting on that same set of issues. And women were sharing their stories. The internet was a big part of this, things going viral, talking about harassment from the workplace to scary brushes that could endanger their lives. And some of that was in seeking court action where it was legal, where the deadlines hadn't been passed, and some were sharing just finding safety in numbers.
I know it could be discouraging, but once your voice is out there, it could affect millions or other thousands of people out there who have been harassed as well.
My silence allowed it to continue.
I worked up the courage to come forward and tell my story.
A part of me always felt like maybe I did something for him to treat me that way.
I want my story to be heard so people could take this situation seriously.
But when I found out it wasn't just me.
It's okay now to speak your truth because we're tired of being ashamed of a crime that we didn't commit.
That's just some of what we got out of that movement, what we learned, what people were listening to, a Me Too push that actually began years earlier when that term was first created. It started these conversations, and it began with Weinstein, so it started teeing off certain Hollywood stories, and that meant it sometimes focused on the admitted sort of celebrity angle, prominent women, actresses, often initially white women. The activist who coined the term said we did also need a wider embrace of all potential victims, including women of color, while also noting that anything was a start because the immediate impact will be a national conversation.
Those women came forward to bravely tell their story, unaware of what would happen. The media loves white women. They love y'all.
I write about that in my book. Right, like missing white women syndrome.
Exactly. I just don't want this to be about women fighting women, right?
Yeah.
Because it's more so about us fighting a system that continues to perpetuate the same stories and stereotypes and ideas.
And that's a theme in all of this, because 8 years after that initial Me Too burst, there is, both in law and in some of the national conversation, whatever you call it, more awareness about other victims. Many of the alleged victims in this case were women of color, sometimes sex workers, who of course can do that job, but also are not supposed to face, above and beyond what they agree to, any other physical violence or crime. Diddy had power over so many of these individuals. Those dynamics were at the center of the R. Kelly trial, a big issue in music. I showed some of those women speaking out. Indeed, here is a Chicago journalist, Mary Mitchell, on the possible victim blaming.
That there were so many misogynistic lyrics and rap music, and that people complained about it so much that given a clear view of an African-American young girl being mistreated, that they would not support her. That's what I found shocking and disgusting.
That was in the R. Kelly case. He was convicted of sex trafficking and sentenced to 30 years in prison. So this is some of the context of what we're witnessing now today, as during opening statements, the prosecutors discussed what they called Combs' alleged brutal abuse of Cassie Ventura, a woman that he dated, and another ex. The Washington Post reporting prosecutors will be able to play this damning 2016 footage from a security camera that shows Combs beating and dragging her in 2016. Well, for his part, I can report to you that Combs has pleaded not guilty to all charges. Legally in court as a defendant, he is presumed innocent, like all defendants. If convicted, he could face up to a life sentence. This is a criminal case from the government. It comes amidst the wider reckoning in civil cases, which people can, of course, file themselves. 81 people filing suits accusing him of sexual misconduct or assault. And as you see up here, it is pretty split almost equally by gender. 43 women and nearly as many men, 38. Now, legally or factually, men can be a victim of any crime, including sexual assault. But stigmas remain here, from how prosecutors view claims from male victims to how they're received in society. And then the other layer of how this can be repressed in parts of hip-hop culture, lyrics and attitudes which traffic in blatant homophobia, even as other parts of music can sometimes be more progressive, more welcoming of different ways of living, or saying sexuality shouldn't matter, we're all equal. And yet in hip-hop, it's an issue, from homophobic language to sometimes conduct.
Everybody in hip-hop discriminates against gay people.
The way in which hetero Black masculinity has to show up. Ingrained in that is I should be homophobic.
You cool in hip hop being gay as long as you ain't rapping.
Those are just some folks who are knowledgeable about this or involved in the art. You saw some artists there. It's an issue in the Diddy trial, as you have reports that even today, young people online who say maybe you don't have the problems of the past are posting all these memes about Diddy's alleged behavior that, quote, perpetuate insidiously homophobic rhetoric, the idea that it's more shameful to be a gay man than to be an abuser. I want to share another musician, R&B's Tank, reflecting on what he calls this elephant in the room.
It's something about Black men and the homosexual conversation that is a mess. The phobia as it relates to Black men is the elephant in the room. And no one will actually articulate their devastation, right? Because you have to think, like, for a Black man, the worst thing to be called is gay.
So you have a type of alleged homophobia there, again, if you listen to people involved. And then you have repression. Then you have sex and gay sex. And now you have a case where you have victims, many of them alleged victims, we say that legally, many of them male. And a question of how that's received by, as I said, the jury of our peers. And do we look at the actual evidence and not fall victim ourselves in our minds to these various ways that we can become closed-minded or perpetuate in stereotypes that get in the way of the truth and the evidence? That's what this jury will have to decide, among other things. It's a complex but important case that's surfacing these issues right now on day one.